related to the current conditions or specific markets or anything we're talking about throughout the process, you could simply just message. There's a chat button there at the bottom, and we can take care and address any questions you may have specific to the process or what have you here. And the purpose of this is to go through the home buyer's process. And, you know, because we can't do this face to face, this allows for a much more personal interaction. And, you know, it allows us to still get in front of buyers, because there's a lot of buyers out there that are wondering with regards to the environment we're in, you know, how does this affect me? And, you know, how do we still find a house with you know, the COVID-19 surrounding us?
Hi, David.
David, welcome.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
All right. And Johanna is okay. Give it one more second here to try to connect.
Holly Pollock and all.
What's it say, Alan? Listen.
Oh, okay. Hello, Johanna.
Because I was doing. Sorry about that.
All right.
Oh, my background is still there. Can't hear you, Mike.
Coincidentally, I was just saying, as in an effort to keep background noise or what have you out of the mix, if we're not specifically up, maybe we'll just hit mute if you could. Okay. All right. So again, we'll let the attendees jump on here. Holly Pollock, hello. Yes, you would be muted. That's correct. But we can see any comments you guys might have. So feel free to chime in. If there's something you guys specifically want addressed, we can do that. The purpose of this webinar is to explain the process, how it all works, how we can help you today in the market, what you should expect, how the COVID-19 has affected us, so on and so forth. You know, with what used to be a very face-to-face experience with doing this seminar has now turned completely virtual, and that goes with the home search experience as well. You know, you may only need to leave your home several times, maybe even never, depending on how comfortable you are or your risk tolerance with regard to COVID-19. One of the things we'll get into is the virtual showings that we're doing, and you know, how we're moving the needle for our buyers and the clients that we have there. But before we get into the event, the information that we're going to provide to you is basically a bird's eye view from the general buying experience. And everyone's situation is different, right? It could be lease, could be, you know, I have a month-to-month, or I have a long-term lease, or I'm saving for a grant to come in, or you know, I'm waiting for funding from a family member, or I have a house to sell, or there's all these different, really everybody's situation is different. And, you know, so if you're asking yourself, well, where do I stand? You know, I kind of wonder how this will apply to me. You're probably a perfect candidate for a one-on-one strategy session that we're going to hold after this. So you can click the link. I'll put it on the right-hand side here. And it'll be to schedule a one-on-one appointment, a 15-minute strategy session with, you know, one of the agents you see here. And again, all you have to do is click the link that I will be putting into the chat here. So as we get into it, I'd like to, again, for those of you who are joining us later, this is Jim Lyman. We have Kristen Riley. We have David Schwartz, Johanna Clark, Rick Field, and myself, Mike Field. And very happy to have you all on here. And some of you may be watching this later on the rebroadcast, and some of you are watching with us as we do the live webinar. So Kristen, I'd like to maybe have you lead off and talking about the first steps, right? When you get a new buyer client and you're introduced, whether, obviously a lot of your business is by referral. So maybe when you get a referral from a past client, or maybe you meet a new buyer who calls in on one of the nice listings you have, maybe break it down to how those first couple steps work for you.
Yeah, so generally the first steps when we meet a buyer, we would schedule a buyer consultation in the office to kind of discuss their wants and needs, anything that we can help with to get them started with the process and kind of direct them on what's to come, with the home buying process.
Can I stop you one second? Dave, just check your mute there. There's a little bit of an echo in the background, I'm sure.
Good. Okay. So with, in lieu of being able to do any face-to-face interactions right now, some things that we're doing to continue to be able to do buyer consultations, we're discussing over Zoom private video chat, and some of the things that we discuss with buyers are, the types of homes they're looking for, what their anticipated budget is, the reasons for purchasing now and after buying, kind of what the strategy is, and to get them set up with the right things that they're looking for in a home. Once we have a general understanding of the buyer's needs, then we'll kind of discuss, have they already spoken with a lender to go over pre-approval, what type of loan they're doing, which will kind of help guide them through what sort of properties they should be looking at. And if they do have a lender, we may offer a second opinion, because we always tell people it's good to shop around so that they're making sure that they get the best rate and terms.
Okay, you touch on a lot of good stuff there. One of the things, I guess typically when you're developing, the initial conversations with these guys, is this something, we're doing in person? Are you bringing them to the office, or are you just going out and looking at properties right away?
Generally, I like to have that conversation with people before I get them into a property, because I think it helps put kind of lay the groundwork for the process. And, it helps me understand if I know what their budget is before I start looking at properties that may be outside of their budget or not exactly what they're looking for. We like to have that groundwork established. And usually I like to do that face-to-face with a buyer consultation, but with everything that's going on, we're kind of doing that more virtually to at least get that established for our clients.
Okay. And one of the things you mentioned, with regards to have they spoken to a lender, what do you find? Do you find that most people have or haven't before they get into it?
I think I would say it's more common that people have not spoken to a lender. I would say maybe somewhere around 25 to 30% of the buyers, by the time they contact me, they've already gotten a pre-approval. Most times they call on a house first, or inquire about real estate first before. And some people don't know that that's usually the first step, and that's kind of where we guide them to contacting a lender, because a lot of people don't know that you should do that first.
Okay. And so with regards to how soon would you say, or how many properties would you say those people have looked at typically when you get a call with the new buyer or the referral? Do you feel like most people have already started looking, or are they really that new and green? Like, are you their first call, I guess?
Yeah, I find a lot of times when I do get people calling on a property, some of the questions that I'll ask them is, have you looked at anything, have you spoken with any other realtors? And a lot of times the answer is no, you're the first person, or you're the first person I've spoken to, or this is the first property I've called on. And generally I see people kind of browse online, just to see what's out there. And then when they see something they like, that's when they're going to initiate that phone call. And oftentimes we're the first person that they're speaking with.
Okay. All right. All right. So basically the first step is whether you get with them on the buyer consultation or not, you think the lender is really the first play is understanding the mortgage side of things.
Yeah, I think people, it's good for people to have that in place. Because like I said, the more you know about what they're looking to spend down payment wise, monthly, that's really is what's gonna hone in on what search criteria to set for them. And
Okay.
until they have that discussion with a lender to see kind of where they fall in place with that, it's hard to really determine that.
Okay. You know what always surprised me whenever I talk to people, when you talk to them about the financing, and when you say to them, hey, X amount, let's just make up an example. If you buy a, $150,000 house, your payment is, $1,100 a month, right? With the taxes and everything included. And then for every 1,000 that they go up or down, right? If you spend an extra 10 grand, it only raises or lowers their payment by the tune of like $30 to $40 a month. I feel like that's the one thing that people are always like so shocked at. They're like, really? Like, so it's not even worth putting more money down, And I feel like, especially first-time buyers, I feel like they're always like so surprised at how little the change in the monthly payment is, And one of the tricks we always use is when it usually for every 1,000 that you go up or down, it's usually about whatever the interest rate is at that time. So if the interest rate's 3.5, it's like $3.50 per 1,000, right? So 10,000 would be about $35 a month, and if it was 4.5, it'd be about $45. But I've just found that people are always very, very surprised at that.
I agree.
Yeah, something I'll definitely add to that too is that I think that the idea that you need to have 20% down to buy a house is really a myth that even myself, when I bought my first house, I was under the impression that was the only way to do it. So it's really cool today, some of the more unconventional or newer ways of different down payments to still get some really good value to get into a house that has as much money as most buyers think they might need.
It's a good point. I feel like a lot of times, and maybe it's less of a misconception than when I first got into business here, but I would always hear buyers like, well, I got to wait till 20%. It's like, well, yeah, but then as you're saving, as you're spending $1,800 a month in rent or $1,500 a month, like you're working backwards because you could be getting in at like 3 or 5 or 10%, So again, as we're going through here, we're going to move on to the mortgage process. But before I did that, I just wanted to just mention for those who are joining us later on here, this is a overall webinar for the process of buying a home in today's market. And to the right here, I'm going to drop a link in momentarily because your situation may not be exactly the same as the next person next to you on this webinar. So if that's something that you need a more one-on-one strategy session, click the link. It's a Calendly link that we can put you in our calendar, and we can make sure we get you set up with a 15-minute one-on-one strategy session that'll really help move the needle here if it's something you're looking for. And so Dad, let's talk a little bit about the pre-approval process itself, right? So once that person gets with the mortgage lender, what things do you think, specifically they should be paying attention to?
Well, I think that obviously when you buy a house, it's an investment, okay? And I want to add this. Just Saturday morning, I was listening to a financial planner who had spoken to a guy who had his retirement of $1 million. Okay, the guy was like 68 years old, and in the past 2 weeks, it went from 1 million down to 700,000. Now, I have 4 adult sons. As soon as they graduated from college, I encouraged them to buy a piece of real estate, like at 22, 23 years old, because I was licensed back in 1975, and in each case, yourself included, you all bought properties, and by the time maybe you're 27, 28 to 30, you'd sold those properties and you took that equity as an investment and you moved into something in a greater amount. So I think a lot of people right now wish they had their money in real estate as opposed to municipal funds and stocks and so on. But any one of these agents here, myself included, can refer you to a very capable and experienced mortgage originator. And no real estate agent should be out showing any property until the person has been pre-approved for a mortgage. And the pre-approval process is such that you sit down for the sake of 15, 20 minutes and you get a qualification. Your mortgage originator can tell you how much of a down payment you need. He can tell you how much your monthly payment will be. And I mentioned this, that a lot of the monthly payments today are a lot less than rent payments. I mean, we're listening about rent payments anywhere from $1,400 to $1,900 to $2,000 a month, and mortgage payments are $1,100 to $1,500. So and then of course there's the four basic types of mortgages you can get. You can get the conventional, and then you can get the FHA, you can get the VA if you're a veteran, and USDA, which is mortgages for properties that are in the country, basically out in the suburbs. But as I say, you shouldn't really be out showing property until such time that somebody has been pre-approved. And the purpose, as well as getting pre-approved, is when you make an offer on that house you love, it's probably going to be a house that somebody else loves too. So you're going to be competing with multiple offers, and as a result of that, you might not get that first or second house because, but you're going to have a better advantage if you can produce the fact that you've been pre-approved already by a lending institution.
What about so you touched on the different loans there. So conventionally speaking, what do we got? The minimum down payment there?
5% down on that, all right, up to 20%. The FHA, 3.5% down. So essentially, anybody with any couple or individual with a full-time job with about $15,000 could buy a house right now or have access to $15,000.
So now, obviously, there's the down payment, and then there's closing costs, right? So you take those two numbers and you put those together, and then we come up with what the total amount of cash to close is, right? And so a lot of buyers, they'll think, geez, I got 20 grand to work with. How can I put that to best use, right? And so it depends on where you're looking and what the taxes are. A major factor to your closing costs is going to be how much of those taxes are. A property with taxes at 8 grand, there's going to be a lot more in closing costs than a property where they're about 4,500. Because to feed that escrow or to initiate that escrow, if you're less than 20%, the bank's going to require you to have an escrow account. If that's the case, then you're going to have to feed that kitty at the closing to establish the escrow account, right? So I think that's one thing that a lot of people coming into this process really need help understanding up front is, hey, I need to have the cash to close and the down payment, and then you put those together. That's the total number you're going to need.
Let's not forget to talk about the seller incentive.
Concession.
Seller concession, because if you need $15,000 and you only had 8, you can get an additional $7,000 if the seller is willing to basically pay for your closing costs. So with $8,000 and the seller concession of 7, you could probably buy a house up to $150,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else is cool about pre-approvals is not only do they show you what your payments will be, as Mike also spoke about with taxes. Like, I can't tell you how important it is to know when you start looking at houses where your ceiling should be for taxes. And a lot of the times when you get with the right lender, they can tell you your ceiling should really be about this, like let's say $5,000 if you want your payments to be so forth. So some people might want to look in different school districts or counties to get more bang for their buck with tax ceilings included and factored in.
Yeah, it's a major adjustment from the payment from one person to the other, So one of the things, one of the things that, basically, you meet with the buyer, you talk to the agent, and you talk about, their needs, and you carve out a search for them, and you get them set up, and then we make sure that they're pre-approved, right, with the lender. Let's talk a little bit about the actual showing process, right? Because once Kristen meets with them, sets them up in the MLS, gets them with their search, finds out exactly what they're looking for. Within that week, probably they're going to want to start looking at properties. And then at that point, Dave, what can you offer out regarding the showing process?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, real estate is essential service. So the good news is that if you are motivated, ready, and willing or able to buy, we can move forward. We are showing homes on a case-by-case basis and practicing safe showing strategies, which include wearing gloves, wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart for social distancing, not touching anything in the house, locking up, then discarding the gloves or washing and sanitizing our hands while never really touching our face, which is hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of hard. I did it like 7 times while we've been Zooming, and I've been noticing now because of this mask thing how many times I actually touch my face. Oof, kind of freaky. Now let's talk about the buyers that don't have the urgent needs, and this is probably going to be the majority of people that we're speaking to today in this market with such uncertainty. The real estate market is ready and adapting to the new norm by offering virtual tours. These tours consist of 3D renderings and new 360-degree technology, all the way down to a simple video that even the seller can record, or we can set up a conference and kind of walk through it together, kind of giving the idea that you're there without some of the associated health risks. Most top agents are adapting, and now many homes offer this virtual viewing option and help you narrow down your options. Not that every agent will offer a virtual tour, so if you come across a house on Zillow, MLS, or another agent that you don't see something, let us know, and if we can set up some sort of video walkthrough, whether it is us going to a vacant house, coordinating with the seller to get on a 3-way conference call much like this to walk us through so we can ask questions. It's a new frontier, and it's a little challenging, but it's not something that we can embrace together and get through it.
So Dave, on that note, right, you got these virtual showings.
Sure.
What are you doing? Like what platforms, tell the people out there what platforms, what's the best
Certainly.
platform?
Well, first and foremost, it's working with whatever you as the buyer are comfortable with. Some people just aren't that technologically proficient. And in that case, you want to talk to them, say, hey, who is technologically proficient in your life? It might be their husband, their daughter, their kid, in which case you find out what works best for them. I've done FaceTime with some clients. I've done Skype with others. I did a Facebook messaging video conference with another. It's really case by case, but what's really been beneficial for me personally has been Zoom. Being able to show my listings as a listing agent, go through it for the buyer with a buyer's agent in tow and the buyer. Everyone can get together, ask the questions, take the time to go through the house and so forth. And it's really cool to be able to have multiple people sharing the same view like we are right now.
What about Jimmy or Johanna? Do you guys have any preferred platforms?
I had success with simple FaceTime showings. So just keep it simple. Set up a phone call as soon as you get to the house and go with it. So you don't have to get fancy if you already know your client. Just a quick FaceTime works for me.
Okay. Jimmy, how about you?
Use FaceTime, and then the social media platform you prefer for virtual tours. That worked. Had one where I wasn't, the people weren't comfortable with anybody. They actually did a video, I cleaned it up, and then I posted it, and I've gotten some response from that. So, we're trying everything we can, and, just to keep everybody safe, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, something that, to speak on kind of what you were saying, Jimmy, I had someone that didn't really know how to video conference. So something that we did was I walked through the house, recorded a 4K video on my phone, uploaded it to the cloud, and then watched it with the client through their computer. They were on the phone, I was on the phone. We're both watching on 2 different computers, but it still accomplished much of the same goal.
One of the things I think we've talked about, and I think each of us probably in a different day or time, we've discussed these, and this is something new, right? So as a result of COVID, we're doing much more of these virtual tours. And, one of the things we've all individually talked about was like, there's a lot of these tours out there that are available, and the agents might have shown it. Somebody needs a battery for their smoke detector. So,
Yep.
so we might have shown them, right? Or we might have pulled those up, but you know, if you're working with a buyer, you want to work at their speed. So, you know, that's why it's important for you to go and film the house, because as you're walking through, they may say to you, hey, hold on, like, I'm more interested in looking at the kitchen or whatever. So, like, that's why the live interaction is really important, because if you're just walking off of a already filmed thing, the person might be like either brutally slow or just shooting the ceiling when they think they're supposed to be hitting them, you know. So again, the live interaction is going to perform way better, you know.
Mike,
Well, it also allows you to look at parts of the house that whoever's doing a static video might be trying to avoid. So when you're looking at a virtual walkthrough, they're not going to show the cracks in the foundation. They're not going to show some of these other things. So it's important as a buyer to, as you said, Mike, go to the live video so you can really make sure you're not missing anything and you can be more thorough.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jimmy, what about, so let's talk, all right, so you get out, you get looking and you know, what about for the people once they found, you know, the one, what's, talk to us a little bit about the process and, you know, give us the, you know, the perspective from your end there.
well, I mean, if we're at that point and the buyer is absolutely set on moving forward with an offer, then we basically prepare the offer same as we would, you know, without this pandemic.
Okay.
You know, we put together the offer, all, you know, online e-signing. We present the offer to the sellers. We go back and forth in conjunction with our client. Verbally after that to get to a set price. Once we have the set price in, then we pretty much solidify the deal. If it's a deal where everything has been done virtually, the client will have a contingency in there that at whatever date we come to after attorney approval or whatever, then we can get the client an actual visit to the home. So they have that built-in protection that if they ultimately get into the house and they're not satisfied, they can withdraw from the deal. And
So let me, Jimmy, just if you don't mind, let me just touch on that because you bring up a good point with the attorney approval. So basically what you're saying is Joe and Mary go, or you go in virtually for the house. You look at it, you show it with them. They love it. They think it's the neighborhood they want to be in, yada, yada. They make an offer, offers accepted. Prior to the attorney approval, you're saying that they would actually be allowed to look at it?
either prior to or more than likely, or once the attorney approves the contract, at some point, whatever's safe for everybody involved,
Yeah.
they have to be able to visibly see this home and say yay or nay.
Yeah. So basically, I got it. So yeah, right. So they're gonna go in. They'll be able to take a walkthrough before the deal is like completely locked in, and both attorneys agree to it. They get at least a chance to walk through and just make sure that it's what they think it is based off of the experience we've had up until that point.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, go ahead.
We also have the COVID addendum, which allows protection for the buyers and the sellers per se, but for the buyers we're talking about, it gives them an extra layer of protection that due to the pandemic, you know, for various reasons, they can withdraw from the deal without penalty.
So, all right. So that's obviously not something we were doing 4 or 6 or 8 months ago, right? So one of the modifications we're doing to today's business is dealing with that. And these are workarounds as we're bringing them out to anybody who's on the watching the webinar here. These are one of the changes we're seeing, right? So it's how we conducting showings, and then how are contracts being written, right?
Correct. It's just another built-in layer of protection during these circumstances where a buyer has an added layer of protection when buying a home under these conditions.
Okay. So one of the things that just comes to mind here is with regards to the process itself, right? You bring up the attorney approval. We might as well just take a quick second and go through basically there's 5 contingencies to the contract, and it's attorney approval, it's inspections, it's your mortgage commitment, it's your title search, and then it's the closing, right? So in any contract, those are like the five contingencies, if you will.
Correct.
On that note, the attorney approval is usually like 3 to 5 days from accepting of the contract. The inspections are usually done around 2 weeks from acceptance of the contract. The mortgage commitment's usually like 30 days out from acceptance of the contract. Now the title search usually comes back like a week or two after the mortgage commitment has been issued by the bank, right? And then the closings are usually about 40 to 60 days out. They may be slightly pushed out in today's environment, but that's pretty much when people would get into it.
We have the appraisal in there also, Mike.
Appraisal, good point, right? So right before the lender issues commitment, they're gonna have that appraisal done. Now that's interesting, you bring that up, Jimmy, because when people talk about like, the out-of-pocket costs for the buyers, you got your down payment, right?
Yep.
Which is usually like $1,000 per 100,000 that you buy for. So if it's $200,000 house, it's $2,000, 400, $4,000, etc. The other thing you're gonna do, you're gonna pay for that home inspection, which we'll get to, and that's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, $500 to $700 out of pocket, and then the appraisal, as Jimmy mentioned, at the time of the mortgage application, which is usually done like in the first week of the contract. That's when you'll apply for the mortgage, and the bank will take your credit card to be able to process the appraisal when the time is right. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is you don't want to have the appraisal done if you didn't get through your inspections, because you're going to have you're going to pay for an appraisal on a house that you're not buying because you had an issue with the inspection that didn't get through, right?
Well, Mike, we try to like make the steps so that you're not putting any money, ahead of time.
Right.
And the one come up from people that have owned homes before and new home buyers is your homeowner's insurance, your hazard insurance.
Yep.
They're requiring 1 year's payment for a bond. So in other words, like I've had people, I don't know if they were shocked or not, but they had to come up with, $1,000 for a homeowner's policy for a year prior to close. So that's something that you should also think of as a homeowner.
Okay. Yeah, good point there. Actually, I'm just thinking when we're in person, I have kind of a flow that we do on this, and obviously this is a little different, but one of the other things I think buyers need to remember is, let's say you close in June, your first mortgage payment isn't due until August, right? So if you're trying to line this up with a lease end date, that's obviously good to know that, so you can avoid making that double payment, Jimmy, anything else in terms of the process once you get under contract there?
No, but I mean, that's when we'll stay in contact with our customers, our clients, the buyer, and we'll stay on the dates, with the attorney approvals, with the inspections, anything as it comes up as a result of the inspections. I mean, that's something people should know, that when you have an inspection, they're going to point out everything they find, and anything under $1,500 is kind of for your own rainy day checklist. Once you're in the home over the years, you can work on. But if there's big ticket items or anything that comes in over $1,500, then we would go back and we would renegotiate either, what are you going to fix this? You're going to give us credit? You're not going to do anything? Again, the buyer would have some little more control, and between the agent and the attorney, we can negotiate getting that rectified or walking away, whatever the case may be. I find a lot of times sellers don't want to lose the sale, so they cooperate. Sometimes the buyers, you got to stick to the item. You can't be looking at nickel and dime. If you got 5 outlets, that doesn't constitute $1,500.
Right.
That's what you have to move forward. It's for the protection of you and the big ticket items. And then once we get through that, then it's you dealing with your mortgage people, getting your commitment. The attorneys move forward. They'll get the bank will get the appraisal done. We'll get the title. And it seems like a long process, but if it goes smoothly, 45, 60 days, you're in your home.
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to speak to something that, we can all experience. We've all experienced this. Would be this one little aspect is the buyer's remorse aspect of selling a home.
Buying or selling?
The buying. Not too many people on the selling side are remorseful that they sold, but they're,
Yeah.
Every now and then you got that buyer's remorse situation, and we all have our horror stories that you get a call the next afternoon after you think you sold a house, and for whatever reason, these people have felt, I don't know. You're buying a big ticket item, and a car, a house, and sometimes you're always wondering if you did the right thing. So that's just something that people, particularly first-time buyers, should be aware of.
Yeah, I I say in today's market, the win for the buyers is the interest rate. Like, I mean, for these people lock in to mid threes to low threes, depending on the day and the markets. I mean, that's the win, man, you know?
Without a doubt, yeah. Because I sold real estate when the interest rate was 18%. Try selling a house when the interest rate is 18%.
What? What
Yeah.
was the price on the place at that point?
Under 100,000, but the fact was, what you used to have to do is get the seller to hold a second mortgage.
Oh, my
All right,
God.
so you know, for like some of the purchase price at a low rate of maybe at the time 5%. So it was unbelievable.
Rick, how much did a loaf of bread cost back then?
About 4 cents. Cigarettes were only 50 cents too.
How many years later did the car get invented? So Kristen, or let's see here. So let me see. Couple other things I want to get to here. The process. Thought there was something else on that note, Jimmy. I'm thinking that. Oh, Johanna, what about? How about? Could you talk a little bit about like, you know, what we're doing to help people out, and also maybe just to piggyback Jimmy. That's something we really talked about before, but maybe explain the different people in the contract. Like, so anytime you're buying a house, you have, you know, the team behind you. Who, you know, what different? If I'm buying a house, who do I need to interact with from the time I sign the contract to the closing table? Who is like my support system?
Right. So after you find your house and put the contract together with your agent is really the point person for that contract going forward. There are a lot of dates in that contract, a lot of contingencies, which we just mentioned, and the agent is really the person that holds all those dates. So they will be coordinating first with the attorney, both attorneys really, to make sure that contract is signed off in time. There is an attorney period, so there is a deadline for that. Next up is inspections. So we also have an inspection deadline in the contract. And usually we need results of those inspections. That's a separate deadline that is after the inspections. And then the agent would be helpful with reporting those results or renegotiating any inspection results with the buyers and sellers. In the background, we have the buyers going through their bank to make sure that they're applying on time and that we're moving forward with the bank. So that includes ordering the appraisal once we're through inspections, ordering, having the attorneys order the title thereafter, and then providing the title report to the bank if they need it, and just coordinating everything that goes along with getting the deed and the title and the loan all on the same page.
So we got, so just to kind of recap there. So you got the attorney. Well, you got your in order of like, I guess who you're going to get. You got your agent, right? You got, once the agent has got the contract accepted, you got your attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You got your home inspector.
Yep.
You got your loan officer.
Yep.
And then you got like the appraiser and then the title
Yeah.
company, right? Those are kind of like one step removed from personal.
Yeah. And then agents are often called upon to recommend any of these people, with maybe the exception of the appraiser and the title company, which kind of go hand in hand with the loan officer.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a short list in your back pocket, because a lot of buyers will need help selecting inspectors or attorneys.
Yeah. Well, and that's where obviously having a big net like we do, right? Casting a broad net, we have a lot of different people that we come in contact with. You know, I know they may not, you know, the people watching this may not know, but I know that we always talk about, you know, the really good experiences we have and a lot of the people that we feel do a great job. And then we also, you know, make it known when somebody might not be up to snuff, or, you know, we share different stories that need to be, you know, exposed in terms of, you know, bad issues we've had. So I guess from our perspective, one of the things that I think you guys do a great job is among many is keeping kind of tabs on each other, knowing what kind of experiences we're having, and making sure that we are helping to utilize the best people in the business, frankly.
Mhm.
You know,
Hey, Mike,
Jimmy.
you had touched on the earnest money. It's something for people that are on here for the buyers. The money they give as a deposit, they need to realize too that that goes towards their down payment. I've had people say, "Oh, where does that go?" Or they didn't realize that that was also part. You know, if someone's putting down 3,000 and then they're coming to figure out how much money they need at the table, they have to realize that that 3,000 goes back towards that final number. So that gives a little more reassurance.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Thank you for mentioning that.
And
I
just one,
actually,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say, I had somebody yesterday ask me, they're like, what, do I get that? Like they they thought, like, they were like, do we get that money back or does it count? I'm thinking, well, shame on me for not explaining that. But at the other side, I was thinking, well, geez, if you didn't get it, it just means it goes like into the abyss.
You bring up a great point. I mean, a lot of times I find myself, I don't want to assume that my buyer client knows, but sometimes we get caught up in it and they may not know. So for the people watching, don't be afraid to ask us any questions or stop us and say, hey, sometimes, you know, we don't mean to, but you take the assumption that they know something when they may not. This is new to them.
Yeah.
You know, one other thing, like you guys brought up, that I'll say, we make recommendations. And the one thing I find is, and I have many attorney friends and I love them all, but it's like anything else, they practice specific. And when I started this, it was, okay, you're an attorney, you can do real estate. And you can, don't get me wrong. So when someone says, hey, I have a question, all I will say to you is that the biggest way a deal goes sideways is when you have someone who's a friend or relative really doesn't know what they're doing. And I'd hate to see you with the home of your dreams because, you know, and then I've had people that have friends who will say, hey, listen, that's my specialty, and refer me to somebody. And that's too good. 99% of the time it's still smooth, but that one time it doesn't, you want to have an attorney that practices it because it makes my life, you as a buyer, it just makes everything difficult. More than
And if you don't have a good person, you're losing your deposit. I mean, for the amount of money it really costs to have an attorney who's a real estate attorney, you're talking about less than $1,000, which in 90% of all deals is less than the deposit. So in a lot of the times when you have a litigating attorney or someone who isn't specifically, you know, focused on real estate, like you said, Jimmy, it could result in you losing your deposit. So it's you know, for saving the little bucks it might cost you by getting a friend or family discount, I definitely support your recommendation there, Jimmy, with going with a real estate professional when it comes to an attorney.
And Dave, you bring up a good point. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that they're saving. I was thinking about their obligation to a friend or family member. But if the friend or family member doesn't tell them, hey, get someone who does this, and then they also have their work calendar and they can't get to their friend's particular issue, again, we have dates you work with. There's just no reason to create issues. That's all I'm saying.
It's hard enough of a process as it is, I guess, right?
All right.
I use the analogy where, you know, if I was going to get my teeth cleaned, I wouldn't go to an eye doctor, you know, and just like if you're getting your eyes checked, you're not going to a chiropractor. You want to use the type of lawyer that's like the type of doctor you would use for the need you have.
Yeah. Unless they're unavailable, I don't see why you wouldn't, right?
Correct.
Kristen, Jimmy mentioned and Johanna was mentioned about the inspections here. What can you offer out in terms of explaining, you know, what people need to know with regard to that portion of the contract here or purchase process?
Well, like everybody said, we have a lot of inspectors that we can refer people to, ones that we've worked with in the past. You know, it just, as it is important to have a good attorney, it's also good to have, it's important to have a good home inspector. And I think, Mike, you mentioned it briefly before, the price, you know, ranges from 500, you know, to 700 on average. One thing I would add to that too, if you live in an area where it's well or septic, that's going to up that price because you have to get separate inspections for that. I have seen those be upwards of like $1,000 if you're having all those things checked out.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind when you are budgeting for inspections. If you're in somewhere that has to have those things inspected, you're going to be spending a little more out of pocket. It I've had some buyers that don't know that they should attend the inspection. They think it's just kind of like the inspector goes in and, does his or her thing, and, that's it. I think it's very important for the buyer to be present. Essentially, the inspector is going to walk you through everything, and they're going to point things out as they find them. With what we're doing right now in regards to inspections, we're kind of still providing the same result, even though the buyers can't attend. Most of the home inspectors do a full report with pictures, kind of laying out everything that they found. And so we're still able to get those, in the buyer's hands because they're able to do those things. And we kind of, coordinate with the inspector, and, they'll let us know anything that's a major defect in the house, anything that you need to be aware of. So.
What's also cool about today versus before COVID-19, which I actually like about the inspections, is if you have an inspector who can video while he's doing the inspection, you as a homeowner can record it and then play it back later so you can have context to some of the report when you're looking at it, which is a nice thing today that really wasn't available even a couple months ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the reports that they provide it's something that you could look at a year from now. You could go through, and a lot of inspectors will say most of the things that come up on the inspection, if everything goes well, is more of like a to-do list, because they're going to go through everything just so you have a thorough understanding of the ins and outs of your house, and it's can be at little things, missing outlet covers, stuff like that. It's just to protect you and make sure that you're fully aware of what you're getting into.
Johanna, does your ghost child have anything to say about the inspection process? Because we'd love to hear it this is there's no hiding. Everybody's got their kids poking them in the head or anything else, and it's all
Well,
good.
I would say be careful taking your kids on showings because they've been known to point out broken light fixtures and sabotage buyers. They're like, "Do you want this house? It's broken." So,
My son, every time we go in a house and he's with me, every time he's like, "Hey, Dad, where's the basement? Let's go in the basement." I'm like, like every single time I got to bring him somewhere, right? What's his deal?
or they have to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
A vacant winterized house.
Actually, that's one thing. You bring up a point. I've had people before, and this is for the buyers out there. I've had people, they're like, "I can't see a house because I got my kids with me." I'm like, "Well, what the heck does that mean? That means you don't get to bring the kid? Who cares? We'll keep them busy. We'll make sure they're good, and I'll entertain them in the front yard if I need to. I got 4 kids." I said, "I'm the last person. You never need to apologize for bringing your kids anywhere because, again, that's what we got to deal with, But Kristen, anything else on the inspection side of things that people should be aware of, or anybody else have anything to add?
Don't be concerned with the videos because, like Jimmy and Kristen have said, like when you're doing a video walkthrough, if you're not able to see the house, when you're doing a walkthrough we're taking a client who's a buyer to look at a house, don't be worrying about if anything's wrong. Worry about the layout, the fixtures, the aesthetics, because that's really what the home inspector is there for, is to be kind of like your bodyguard to make sure that you're not having anything kind of slipped under the mat. So you can kind of relax and focus on kind of the aesthetic feel versus the mechanical or some of the structural feels that the inspector.
I know what you're saying there, and I just want to clarify that. So what you're saying is, as we're going through the house, look at the house for the value it is in the layout and everything, and assume that there's no underlying issues. And if there are underlying issues, that's what the inspector's for.
Correct. Like you don't have to be worried about looking at every little piece. If you want to, by all means, I'm happy to accommodate that and help you look at every nook and cranny.
Yeah.
But also have some peace of mind that in a kind of an unsure buying situation where you're not actually able to reach out and touch it, which is something I like to do, that you have someone else going who has insurance and is qualified to make some of those technical decisions and assessments like an inspector is.
I agree with that. And I always tell people, like, look, if we're gonna, the major stuff, the hidden stuff, like, we're not gonna worry about that now because there, assume there isn't any. You can make all kinds of assumptions and fears about any house, but at the end of the day, that's why we are gonna have a 2 to 3 hour inspection done on the place when the time is right, you know?
We have a motto, don't get into an argument with your client, okay?
What is it?
Do not get into an argument with your client,
Right. Yeah.
because this is it can be a very testing and difficult process. We've sold many homes naturally, but the fact is, we got to treat each one like it was the first one we're going to sell.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, Rick. I actually agree with you that as realtors, I think as an industry, we are more adept to dealing with these kind of uncertain circumstances with high emotional responses, because when people are trusting us to help them buy a home, which is one of their biggest assets, emotions are always high. And as realtors, that's one of the things I love is we're there to help put out fires. So even in today's market where there's a lot of uncertainty and people are worried and emotions are running high, it's good to have realtors, hopefully like us that care about you and can support you and help, reassure you and help you direct through these uncertain times.
Well, you want to hear from that person 2 to 3 years, 5 years later when they want to sell the house. They want it to have been a very great experience, and you're still in the business and you're going to sell it for them.
Home field advantage, Jimmy, right?
That's it, baby.
Always.
Dave, so we got through inspections, everything's mortgage is done. We got through the end of the line here. Final walkthrough and closing. Talk to us about that.
Awesome. So I actually just got to do this last week with one of my clients, which was
Nice.
strange, but it was cool. So for him, he actually wanted me to go to the house, and I did. I walked through it. We did a FaceTime video. I was able to check the plumbing, make sure that there was no other missing paint, or when they moved the carpet, there wasn't a hole in the floor. Basically, that the house was the way it was, and that it was the same condition as the last time we saw it, which was cool. And then for closings, this is strange, but we can do them visually now. And as a realtor, we don't physically go to closings anymore, which is a little strange to be disconnected at that ending. But I feel it also brings us closer because we're using communication so much more, speaking so much more, when sometimes it would just be meeting face to face.
Yeah. And on the on the actual walkthrough, we're gonna, test the appliances. We're gonna run all the plumbing, right? Make sure there's no active leaks. Test the.
Make sure they didn't leave paint cans in the garage, or that huge, bulky, ugly, ping pong table that was broken in the garage. We want that out, so it's not your responsibility as the homeowner.
Right. Test the HVAC, the heat, AC. Make sure everything's working, and just make sure the house is the same way it was the last time you were in there, right? That's really your last opportunity to do, have any issue with the house before you go to the closing, right? So in terms of this entire process, right? As we covered it here, and spent just under an hour kind of walking you through that. I did mention it a few different times, but for the sake of mentioning it one last time here, in the Zoom webinar chat, as you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a calendar link. Calendly is actually the link. Now, if you want to talk more in depth on these processes, because every buyer is different, everybody's situation is different. I've said it a couple times here today, but if you're interested in having a one-on-one strategy session, click that link. Very easy. Get in our calendars, and we'll make sure we follow up with you. It'll ask you your number, or we'll give you ours, and we can make sure we connect with you on that. And then the other thing I mentioned I was going to do here, but I don't know if I actually mentioned it's in here. You'll see there's a link to a blog that I wrote years ago, and it's timeless. It's called Home Buying 101: The Steps to Making an Offer to Getting to the Closing Table. And it explains in depth the 5 contingencies that we kind of touched on here, and we'll give you a really good understanding on how you're going to go from signing a contract to getting the keys to the house. And as I said, we would invite any and all of you to reach out for a more in-depth conversation on this. Keep an eye out. We will do other seminars. We have plans for other seminars here. And we're going to get into sellers, right, and even investors. So we are here to obviously be a very thorough and promising resource for you. And if there's anything we can do to help your buying, selling, or investment needs, we'd love the opportunity to earn your business. Anything else you guys would like to add here before we sign off?
Nope, just everybody stay safe and healthy, and we're now and even after the pandemic.
This will be over before you know.
All right. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you for all those who've been watching with us. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. It's sunny. Wasn't that way yesterday, so get outside and enjoy the sun.
All right, take care, everyone.
All right.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
You well.